What a story this UNLV team has been. Not only did the Rebels find themselves in the conference championship game for the first time ever, but they also have a 10-2 mark against the spread, which is the best in the country. They've been undervalued in the betting market all season long. Barry Odom has done a remarkable job, so it's really no surprise that he's already receiving interest from big time programs. He may be gone after this year. We'll have to see. That being said, Boise State's playing some of their best football of the season. A 42-14 beatdown on New Mexico. Then they go to Utah State 45-10, followed by a win over Air Force. And if you'll remember, Air Force was undefeated for much of the season, one of the favorites to win the Mountain West coming into the year. Now, both teams are 7-4 to the over this year, which neither team has exactly a lockdown defense. We've seen UNLV give up points to some of the more capable offenses in the conference. 37 to San Jose last week, 27 to Air Force, 31 to Fresno, even 27 to lowly Nevada. And Boise's given up over 25 points per game as well. I don't think the Rebels are going to have much trouble scoring, but let's keep in mind that they're giving up nearly 6 yards per play to their opponents. Boise State over 6 yards per play. One last thing that I want to point out is this will not be much of a home field advantage for UNLV. If you think Boise's going to have trouble coming down here with the crowd and scoring, they're not. Their fans travel extremely well. This is going to be a shootout. Give me the over in the Mountain West Championship game Saturday.
Let's look at a free college football play for this Saturday championship action. We've talked a lot about the big top 25 games throughout the week. I, of course, did my college football top 25 video. Check that out for a preview of all five of the biggest conference championship games this Friday and Saturday. But I want to look at a little bit of an under the radar game that hasn't gotten much attention this week, and that is Appalachian State at Troy. And this is a home game for Troy, the Sun Belt Championship game. And the line opened 6.5, came down to 5 this week. And I do not agree with that move. I think there's some value with the Troy Trojans in this matchup for a couple reasons. First of all, my database simulation, 10,000 games simulated, has on average Troy winning this matchup by over 8 points. So we do get some line value, in my opinion. And I also like the fact that we're getting a much better defensive team in a championship game. Defense wins championships is the old adage. It's maybe not as true as it always was, but I still think the better defense wins out. And these are two pretty good offensive teams. I do think Appalachian State overall, probably the better offensive team, a little more balanced. Both teams throw the ball well. Troy's weakness this year has been a below average rushing attack, but they should have success running in this game against the Appalachian State defense. It's given almost 5 yards per carry. Contrast that to Troy's run defense. It barely gives up over 3 yards per rush. And that's where the difference is in this game is on the defensive side. Troy's nearly a yard per play better defensively than Appalachian State, and they've played a tougher schedule of opponents on top of that. So I like the Troy Trojans at home laying the short price. Take a look at Troy -5, kicks off at 4 o'clock Eastern on Saturday afternoon. And don't forget, if you want my strongest best bets for this Saturday conference championship, NFL Sunday. By the way, the last 2 Sundays in the NFL, 7-1 on my best bets. The only reason we weren't 7-0-1 is because a late score in that Sunday night game. Otherwise, we'd have a push. But still 7-1 the last 2 NFL Sundays. Number one the last 2 years combined in college and pro football sides. Number one this year in the NBA, and number one a couple years ago in college hoops. That's off to a nice start this year as well. Not a bad time to try it on All Sports All Access. You can save big with special promo codes. Check them out right now. 3-day and 30-day specials on my page, Steve Merrill, WagerTalk.com.
For today's best bet on the show, we're going to take a look at the Big 12 championship game, Texas and Oklahoma State. And if there is a team this weekend with the need to run up a score, it would be the Texas Longhorns trying to get into the college football playoff Final Four. Of course, they have that win over Alabama in Tuscaloosa, but right now it's not enough. And having Oklahoma State as an opponent in this game really isn't enough. They probably would have preferred to have Oklahoma in a rematch, maybe get some revenge. It would be a little more respected a victory than will be this one against Oklahoma State if they get it. The national perception, the committee's perception of Oklahoma State, probably that of an above average team, but nothing special, especially with Texas going off as 14.5-point favorites here in this one. So I think if there's an opportunity late, you're laying points here. You have Steve Sarkisian probably with the intention of tacking one on in this particular instance. Style points will count for the Texas Longhorns in this particular game. Um, let's take a look at some of the matchups here. And, last week I used Texas as a top play for clients against Texas Tech. And we'll go right back to the well with similar reasons here for Oklahoma State. The reason for their offensive success, the reason for their offensive resurgence during the season was the emergence of Ollie Gordon at running back. If Oklahoma State can't run, they really can't throw. So if I apply that back to what we talked about last week with Taj Brooks and Texas Tech, you saw the same thing. Texas Tech predicated on getting Brooks going, never got going. Why didn't he get going? Because Texas is the number one rush defense inside the Big 12 and one of the best in the nation. Heading into that Texas Tech game last week, Texas had only allowed 82 rushing yards per contest, which was 42 yards better per game than the second best D in the Big 12, which was Iowa State at 124. So certainly Texas's run defense has been a brick wall all season long. Can Ollie Gordon crack through that? Can Oklahoma State's offensive line push Texas around? I'm not so sure. Texas Tech didn't do it. I don't think Oklahoma State's going to do it here. It creates a little bit of problem for Alan Bowman and the passing game. That being said, you do have decisions here to make when playing this game, and one of them could be, well, I'd prefer to play Texas first half. I think, you have to respect head coach Mike Gundy on the Cowboys sideline, and he knows everything I'm saying here. He knows it's going to be a difficult task to run against Texas. And boy, where his play calling is concerned, he can be creative right out of the chute. We saw Texas Tech score quick last week, but then they got shut down. Maybe Oklahoma State scores quick this week, catches Texas by surprise, and then gets shut down. I can see this game. I'm not saying 57-7 like it was against Texas Tech, but I can see this game playing out very much the same way. And one huge, huge bit of news that came through, I think yesterday, was that Xavier Worthy looks like he's ready to go at wide receiver. And this wide receiving duo of Texas with Quinn Ewers at quarterback is explosive. Big plays abound for the Texas Longhorns. They did lose running back Jonathan Brooks about 3 weeks ago, but the running game hasn't really suffered. Texas just way too many weapons offensively for the Oklahoma State defense, which, to tell you the truth, gave up 30 to Houston and was in a tussle with BYU last week. That's nowhere near what they're going to see here. I think laying the points in this instance, both fundamentally, situationally, Texas, they do play here at noon Eastern, which means they're not going to know a heck of a lot other than the Oregon-Washington result, which could be helpful for them. I think if they have a chance to stretch it out and win by an even bigger margin, late fourth, they'll do so. I'm going to take Texas here, minus the 14.5 in the Big 12 championship game.
Jimmy Adams here, and we have a very interesting handicap as Michigan and Iowa meet up in Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game. Michigan's confidence is at an all-time high after their huge win over Ohio State, a game they put up 30 points in. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, can Iowa hold the Wolverines to 28 or less if OSU couldn't? As of this morning, DraftKings had the Michigan team total listed at 27.5, juiced at minus 120. And I think that's the way we attack this game. A lot has been made about Iowa's defense and how well they've played. But let's take a look real quickly at the quality of opposition for a moment here. Michigan State, Purdue, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Northwestern, Rutgers, Illinois, and Nebraska. Not exactly a collection of great offenses. And now they face a Michigan team averaging 6.4 yards per play on offense. By the way, the one time Iowa was asked to face a decent team, it was Penn State, and the result was 31-0. These teams also met for the championship 2 years ago. The score was 42-3. So now, could Iowa potentially get a score, whether it's through the back door or with a defensive play? It's certainly possible, which is why I'd rather eliminate that and focus on the Michigan team total. I also think we can expect the return of Jim Harbaugh to be an advantage to us in the handicap, and probably not for some of the reasons that most of the viewers think. This Jim Harbaugh thing was blown way out of proportion. I mean, first we had Sharon Moore crying like Jim Harbaugh had died. We have all the free Harbaugh T-shirts. The players really took this Harbaugh thing to heart. They think he was wrongly accused. And my point is just that they're going to be absolutely fired up for his return. Michigan's going to score. Iowa's not going to be able to stop them. Give me the Michigan team total over in the Big Ten championship game.
Steve Merrill back here taking a look at the SEC championship game at 4 o'clock Eastern on CBS Saturday afternoon. And it's an important game, obviously, to say the least. Question becomes, if Georgia loses this game, do they dare stay in the top four? I think they probably do. And if Alabama wins this game, can they get in the top four? I think they probably cannot, because you've got a one-loss Texas team as a 2-touchdown favorite against Oklahoma State and beat Alabama. It's going to be hard to leapfrog that team. The big question, as I talked about in my preview of the Florida State Louisville game, is if Florida State loses, they're out. But if they win, could they possibly fall out? So there is hope for Alabama. But I really think it comes down to maybe the Iowa Hawkeyes winning outright as a 3-touchdown dog, which isn't going to happen. Still an important game, though. And it's always tempting to take Nick Saban and company as a touch underdog, not a touchdown, close to a touchdown dog, currently about 5 to 5.5. But then again, do we really want to fade a Georgia team that's won 29 straight games going back the past couple of seasons? So instead of looking at the side in this one, let's look at the total. And by the way, a couple of years ago, same situation. Alabama was a 6-point dog. They won 41-24. But what I want to point out about that game is it was 65 total points, and it easily went over the total. And I think the over could be worth a look in this one in that 55-point range. Yes, these are two really good defenses, but as we saw last week, for the third straight year in that Ohio State-Michigan matchup, two good defensive teams. It was a fairly high-scoring game again, and a lot of times these Class A teams have great defensive stats because they can beat up on the bad boys. But when stepping up in class against another Class A team, often the points are at a premium here, or not at a premium. There are more points than expected. And I think that'll be the case in this one for a couple reasons. First of all, Georgia slept. They were a very poor ATS team until October and November. They have covered 3 of their last 5. Keep in mind that their first cover of the season didn't come until early October when they placed undefeated at the time Kentucky, who was a top 20 team, and Georgia smoked and put up points in that game. They also put up 43 against Florida in a focus spot and 52 against Ole Miss in the top 10 matchup a few weeks ago. The other games in which they didn't care as much, just 37 against Vanderbilt, just 31 against Georgia Tech last week. So I think it shows that Georgia does bring their A game when they're focused, and they should be very focused for this matchup against Alabama. Meanwhile, Alabama started the season very slowly on offense in September. Remember that ugly 17-3 game against South Florida, which followed, of course, the loss against Texas. But the offense has quietly played pretty well since. In fact, Alabama's only gone under twice in their 12 games this season. They've had a couple pushes, but over the last 7 games, 5 overs, 2 pushes to start with. And the only 2 unders came back in September. They have not gone under the total in the past 2 months, including 5 straight overs entering this game. And that's because the offense isn't bad. They average 10 yards per pass attempt, 36 points a game, 6.5 yards per play. Georgia almost 40 points a game, over 7 yards per play. Yes, these are 2 good defensive teams, but they're 2 really good offensive teams as well. If history has shown us anything, these games are often higher scoring than expected. Let's stay off that side. Let's look at over 55 if you're playing the SEC championship on Saturday afternoon.